Hello everyone and welcome into Bitcoin Max. Today I'm going back to the basics and I'm going to attempt to answer the question, what is Bitcoin? This is a very complex question and it's not easily answered in 2 to 3 minutes. So this may be a little bit of a longer video, but I'll be sure to put chapters in the description so you guys can skip around. If there's concepts that you're already familiar with and don't need me to go over, feel free to skip around to this video. What is Bitcoin? This is a very complex question, a very important question, and a question that I just don't think is asked enough. Even though in 2021, it was the third most searched phrase on Google, which is kind of crazy to think about. But of course, since the prices have dropped, a lot of interest has dropped in Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency space as a whole. Everything that made Bitcoin so valuable in 2021, driving it up to a price of almost $70,000 per coin, all of those principles and concepts are still there, whether or not the price is. And it is odds on that it's going to return to those prices at some point because of these concepts. So let's dig in conceptually instead of just tracking the price and following how valuable it is today, and talk about how valuable it could be years and years from now. So I really think that Bitcoin can be kind of divided into 3 categories when you try to think of what are the most important concepts to understand about Bitcoin. Decentralization, security, and fixed supply. These are the 3 main pillars, in my opinion, that make Bitcoin extremely valuable and gives it the potential to be the next global reserve currency and really change the world, change how people are able to start businesses, change how people are able to transact with one another throughout, different countries, crossing borders, and just make it easier for everyone to use money. But we really do have to go back to the concept of what is money before we get into what is Bitcoin. I know that a lot of people on this channel probably know the term fiat currency. We talked a lot about it throughout the years, but just as a refresher, in case anyone isn't familiar, a fiat currency is something that is given value by a government or governing entity. It doesn't have any value itself. Its only purpose is to transact value. Its only purpose is to be a medium of exchange. The US dollar, the euro, the Australian dollar, the yuan, the yen, whatever you're using as your native currency, that is a fiat currency that is backed up by the government of that country. And they have worked pretty well. I do have to admit that fiat currency has brought society to a place that wasn't possible without it, because people weren't going to lug around their gold. We've talked about this concept a lot. Back when gold was the only form of value available to people, people weren't just going to drag around their gold everywhere. And what if you wanted to purchase something that was worth less than a bar of gold? You're not going to chop up that bar of gold into 20 pieces. That's not how the value of gold works. So when we had paper money that was backed by gold, that was the system that kind of catapulted us into what we're familiar with now. But in 1971, the US actually broke away from the gold standard and just made the US dollar a fiat currency. It's not backed by anything. If it wasn't mandated to be valuable by the government, it would not be valuable. It is just paper and it serves no other purpose than being a medium of exchange. So what Bitcoin is trying to do is become the better version of that concept, because you don't necessarily need something like gold, something that's heavy, not easy to transport, not easy to divide into pieces that you need. You don't need something like that to have sound hard money. You just need something that is incorruptible, transferable, and most importantly, divisible. And Bitcoin absolutely ticks all of these boxes. So if we're looking for a overarching definition for Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto defined Bitcoin as an electronic peer-to-peer cash system. But what exactly does that mean? Because we do have a lot of electronic cash systems out there. Most fiat transactions today are actually driven by digital transactions, and then the ledger is made up after the fact by the banks to make sure that all of the bases are covered. Also, credit cards operate on a monetary network. They settle transactions on that network, and it's all done electronically and digitally. So those can be considered electronic cash systems in a way as well. The one big difference between Bitcoin and all of those is the decentralization, obviously, and the idea that it's peer-to-peer, electronic peer-to-peer cash system. There is no middleman, there is no entity that you have to put any trust in. The Bitcoin network allows you to transact with someone no matter where they are in the world, as long as they have an internet connection and a device that can connect to the internet for them. They can transact through the Bitcoin network and you can transact with them. That is what separates Bitcoin from something like Visa, MasterCard, or the fiat currencies we've been talking about. There is no central entity, there is no middleman, and there is no one that you have to trust. You don't have to put your trust in a person, you put your trust in the Bitcoin network, which is all done through a decentralized system. So the most important thing to understand within this concept is that the Bitcoin network and the Bitcoin currency are actually two different things. The Bitcoin network is what allows that currency to be transacted. The currency is native to the Bitcoin network. They can't operate without each other. They're both integral to what makes Bitcoin, but they're actually two different things. So the Bitcoin network operates all around the world, and it operates through the internet electronically. And the Bitcoin currency that is native to that network is what you transact with other wallets when you're sending or receiving Bitcoin. The decentralization aspect of this is really important to understand. Every system we use today is based on trust. You're either trusting your bank, you're trusting your government, or you're trusting some third-party service that is going to help you send cash to someone in a different country, whether that's Western Union or one of those companies. You're going to have to put your trust in one of those entities in order to do that, unless you're going to go over to another country and hand deliver the cash yourself. And then, of course, it has to be exchanged for whatever native currency that is. Bitcoin solves all of these problems, and you don't have to trust a single person. It is trustless. It was made to be trustless. That's a very important part of the network. A phrase that a lot of Bitcoiners like to use is don't trust, verify. And this brings me to my next point, the Bitcoin blockchain. This is when we're talking about the security of the network and how the transactions are verified. It is done through a system of miners. And these miners are using computing power to basically compete with each other to verify transactions and to basically just solve complex math problems. So when you have the entire argument of, is Bitcoin bad for the environment? Does it use too much energy? This is where that energy usage is mostly coming from. It's from the mining proof of work process that verifies the network, verifies the transactions, and secures the network. I'm going to save the great energy debate for another video because it's a very important concept to understand, and it's also going to be a very long video, so I don't want to get too bogged down into that quite yet. But it's important to understand how that works. The miners, they verify the transaction and they secure the network, and that is done through the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, the blockchain is also a separate entity from the Bitcoin currency and the Bitcoin network. All three of these entities are very important for what makes Bitcoin as a whole, but they all operate separately and they all have different purposes. And it just so happens that the purposes of those three parts of what makes Bitcoin, they're divided into those three sections that I mentioned in the beginning of the video: decentralization, security, and fixed supply. So the fixed supply, that relates to the Bitcoin currency itself. The decentralization, that relates to the network, the Bitcoin network. And then the security of the network, that is related to the Bitcoin blockchain, which secures the network, verifies the transactions. These are the basic concepts, and I really do think that when you're talking about Bitcoin, you don't have to be a computer genius, you don't have to be a programmer, and you don't even have to be an economics expert to understand all of these things. It's actually very simple, and I think that's a misstep that happens when people are talking about Bitcoin a lot. It's not so much that it's a revolutionary technology. There actually are better technologies already within cryptocurrency than Bitcoin. It's not the fastest network. It's not the most amazing technology that is available within cryptocurrency. But the thing is, it is second to none, in my opinion, and in a lot of other people's opinion, because of the fact that the concept of hard money is applied to every single inch of the Bitcoin network and Bitcoin as a whole. So Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever he is, whoever she is, whoever they are, we may never know, but they created Bitcoin in order to be a sound, hard form of money that can't be messed with by governing entities, by banks, by any of these greedy institutions that have taken advantage of the money system for far too long. Do you guys ever notice that when you go to a big city and you look up at those big skyscrapers, they're all owned by banks? It's Bank of America Tower, Chase Tower, the Wells Fargo Center. They're all owned by banks. And how do you think the banks got that much money? The only way to work for a living or start your own business or participate in society in any way is to have a bank account. That's really the only way to do it. So these banks have a stronghold over basically everything that has to do with the monetary supply and with the monetary system as a whole. Bitcoin in every way just wipes out the necessity for a bank. And that's why banks are so scared of it. That's why you hear all of these big bank investors say it's just going to be a bubble, it's eventually going to pop, it's eventually going to be worthless. It's all driven by hype. All these narratives that you hear from the big investment bankers, they are doing that because they are scared that Bitcoin will completely make them obsolete in the same way that Netflix made Blockbuster obsolete. It's the same concept. If you have Bitcoin, you don't need a bank at all. You don't need them whatsoever. And banks are such a big part of the economy, especially in the US. The banks in the US have so much power over monetary policy and all of these different things. And they're just not necessary when you have the Bitcoin network and when you're able to use Bitcoin to operate a business, when you're able to use Bitcoin to pay somebody for a service. All of these things that Bitcoin is able to do just with an internet connection and a device that you can use to access the internet, that is all you need to do everything through Bitcoin. So I think a lot of these, not only governing entities, but a lot of these banks are very scared by the idea of what Bitcoin could accomplish. So we've talked about the decentralization, we've talked about the security and how it's verified, how the transactions are verified through the Bitcoin miners. Let's lastly talk about the fixed supply, because this is a really, really important concept when it comes to Bitcoin versus all of the other cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of popular cryptocurrencies out there like Cardano that have insane circulation supplies for their cryptocurrency. And that's going to be, they're going to run into the same problems that our current monetary system is running into. We are currently in an inflation crisis, and that inflation crisis was caused by printing too much money. The Federal Reserve of the United States has the ability to print more money and put more money into circulation whenever they feel that's a necessary thing to do. This is kind of insane when you think about it, because every time that you print money and put more into circulation, naturally, just based on the simple math equation, those dollars or those units of currency are going to lose value. And it's going to happen fast if you print a lot of money in a short amount of time, which is exactly what happened after the pandemic crisis going into the inflation crisis that we're in now. Again, Bitcoin fixes this. Now, it's probably important to point out that if Bitcoin does see mass adoption where almost everyone within the developed world is using it, and even the undeveloped world, that's a big part of it too, is that it gives opportunity to people in the undeveloped world to do things that they just couldn't do normally with the corrupt government they may be living under. Bitcoin allows people to have access to things that they wouldn't before. So if it does get mass adopted through pretty much the entire globe, what we're gonna see happen is we're gonna see most people use it more as a savings account. And I'm sure there will be day-to-day spending because eventually, just in my opinion, this is just the theory out there, the volatility is going to slow down a lot. And the price is going to stabilize more than we've ever seen before. The more and more people that get onto the Bitcoin network and start using it, the less and less volatility we're going to see. That's just a natural process that's going to happen. So because of the fixed supply, Bitcoin has potential to be the greatest savings tool that has ever existed in human history. Because here's the thing, if you want to save up money to buy a house, buy a car, or any of these things, start a business, what do you have to do? You have to save US dollars. And the other option you have is to invest and hope that that investment gains you a return over a certain amount of time. Well, investments come with risk, and you're never really sure if that's going to pan out. And saving in US dollars can actually be counterproductive if we see inflation rates like the ones we're seeing right now. Because the longer and longer that those dollars sit in your bank account or in your savings account, they're going to keep losing value the more and more money that is printed, put into circulation, and the more and more inflation that we see happen. So Bitcoin, as a fixed supply, there are only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be minted into existence. That's really important to understand. There are only 21 million Bitcoins that will ever be in circulation within the Bitcoin network. And that there's no way that that can change. That's literally coded into the network. There is nothing that anyone can do because of the decentralized nature of the network. No one can ever change that fact. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in circulation. And that is something that no other cryptocurrency can say, and also no other monetary tool can ever say in history. Any fiat currency, gold, we find more gold every day. We find it when we're mining. We don't know exactly how much gold is out there. We know it's scarce, but we don't know exactly how scarce. With Bitcoin, we know exactly how scarce this asset is. I really hope this video helped just illustrate the important parts of what makes Bitcoin potentially so valuable. A lot of the resistance comes from the idea that something better is going to come along and make Bitcoin completely obsolete, just like we were talking about Bitcoin doing with the banks. Well, the thing is, maybe that will happen, but a lot of these new cryptocurrencies that are coming out every day, they're basically coming up with a very complex solution to a very simple problem. The problem is that we don't have a hard form of money that can transport value across time and space. We don't have it. It doesn't exist. We have things that attempt to do it and that do it somewhat well when it comes to fiat currency, investments, all of those different things. But we don't have something that we can say with absolute certainty that if you save using this, you will see that value gain over time. And you will be able to transport the value that you earn today through your job or through investments themselves. And you'll be able to see that grow over time. You'll be able to guarantee yourself that you can transport that value into the future. We don't have that. And what these cryptocurrencies are trying to do, they have these extremely complex solutions to a very, very simple problem. Bitcoin solves the problem by being simple. And I think that that is, again, something that's completely misunderstood sometimes when it comes to Bitcoin. It's not a groundbreaking technology. It's not all that complex. And it's actually very easy to understand. You don't have to have a computer programming background. You don't have to have an economics background to truly understand what makes Bitcoin valuable. It's a very simple concept. It has a fixed supply, it is decentralized, and it is trustless. You don't have to put your trust in a third party when using the Bitcoin network. I hope that this video helped, and I will be doing a lot more of them to dig into these concepts a little more, but this is just gonna be the start and the overview of a lot of these concepts. If you made it to the end of the video, I really appreciate you watching, and I hope you stick around for more content. Be sure to like and subscribe. I will be releasing a lot more concept-oriented videos in the hopes that it helps people understand Bitcoin and crypto as a whole on a more fundamental level. At the end of the day, we have absolutely no idea where all of this is going, but we can make educated guesses based on the information we have right now. So I want to talk a lot more about that. Always keep in mind that this is not financial advice. I'm merely stating my opinions and my findings in my research in order to help you in your own research process. But you should always look for other sources of information besides me, and you should always be sure that you are making your own financial decisions and they're not being made by someone on YouTube. I hope that I can help conceptually, but I absolutely cannot help with direct advice. So that's not what this channel is at all. This is not a financial service. This is a community for discussion. Thanks again for watching, guys, and we will be back with another video very soon.